Welcome to this circle. We're really glad you're here. Welcome to this circle, whether it's the very first time you've been in this circle or you haven't been in this circle for a long time, or you've been in this circle many, many times and it feels like home. We hope for each of you it will feel like home in this time that we spend with one another as we open to explore what it is to find the big picture in our lives. And so we gather with each other and invite one another into this circle. We do that with song.
We come to this time and place to renew our trust in the creativity and sacredness of life.
To reaffirm our intentions to engage life with spiritual depth.
We rekindle the flame of curiosity, hope, and deep wisdom.
To let our hurt and struggle expand our capacity to live and love.
To renew our commitment to work for a just and compassionate world. Into this circle we gather to ground
in our gratitude for life. We come to learn the old deep ways of knowing and to find wisdom for our living. May we challenge one another to be all that we can be, to lay down our pleasures and live truth, to forgive and be forgiven, to live graciously and generously, to commit our energies and our intentions to live largely. May we comfort one another in the sorrows, stresses, and struggles of life. We open to this time together as spiritual community, that we might be inspired to live justly and respectfully with one another, with earth and the community of all beings. May it be so in so many ways. We gather in light, as light, and to be light. We also know that fire is mystery, that we can stand too close to the fire, and sometimes we need to move back in order to gain perspective, in order to be safe. We gather this day around the flame, seeking to know and experience light, seeking to find light for our lives, seeking to light the way for one another, seeking the light of wisdom in ancient stories and contemporary wisdom. And so we take this moment, this time, when we are between getting here and being here, to focus our thoughts and to focus on the light. Chris is away today. He's going to be back next Sunday, and so I get a chance to have a little time in conversation with you. And I thought we might try, each of us, being a camera. Are you up for it? And we each need something to take a picture of. And we're going to take a picture with a long shot and then a close-up. Are you ready? So if we take it with a long shot, let's say it's out here. Let's take a picture of that. Okay? So kind of the long shot at the end of your arm, take a picture of it in your head. You got it? Okay. And then let's zoom it in. Let's zoom it in as close as we can get it. As close as we can get it. And let's put that picture in our heads. Now, I want to show you some pictures taken close up. Can you tell me what that is on the screen? That's a close-up of something, and it's something we use every day. Any guesses? Yes, that's a really good guess. That's a very good guess. You're right. Let's go to the next picture. It's a fork. Wow. Wow, that's a pretty good guess, and scissors is a very good guess. It's really hard to tell when it's that close, right? Let's try another one. What do you think that might be? What's that a close-up of? What do you think, Mary? What does it look like it could be? It could be a lot of things. Something with cracks in it. Do you think it might be something to eat? It might be something to eat. It might be a fruit. What do you guys think it is? It looks like it could be a pumpkin. That's a really good guess. Another guess. Bark. It looks like bark. What do you think out there? Tomato. You think it's a tomato. All right. Well, you're all onto that it is, in fact, something to eat. Let's back out and see what it is. I think it's a walnut. I thought it was a squash even when I saw the big picture, but I think it's a walnut. I need a bigger picture. Let's try another one. Let's see if we know what this is. This is a hard one, I think. What do you think it could be? What's it a close-up of? Peas. It could be. It looks like it could be peas. Olives. It looks like it could be olives. Now, think about it. It's really, really close up. So we're seeing just something really close to it. Any guesses? What do you think? Bottom of a shoe. You think, yeah, it could look like a sole of a shoe. What else? Honeycomb. Yeah, it looks like it could be honeycomb. Really close up. Hey, hey. Anne says, how about a golf ball? Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. All those little dimples on the ball. Good get. Let's try another one. What do you think this is? You guys use these all the time. That's my hint. What do you think? Candles. It looks like it could be candles because it's something standing up, right? Hey, let's try and see if you're right. Yep, crayons. Yeah, that fuzzy little part of the paper. I think we have, yeah, here's another one. What do you think this is? What do you think? It kind of looks like jam, and you're kind of really, really close. What's jam sometimes made of? Yeah, let's back out and see. Yeah, strawberries, exactly. And what about this? This is also something I think you use quite a bit. It's hard to tell because it's so blurry. What? Oh, like a weight. Yeah, it could be. It looks like that. What do you think? It looks like a can of paint. It does, doesn't it? Because it's so close up. But let's see what it is. Wow. Wow. The top of a pencil. You know, it's really hard sometimes to see the big picture. Sometimes we get so close to things that we don't see all there is to see. And sometimes that's what happens for us. That's the last one I have. They're really fun, though. They're really fun. If you have the game Mind Trap at home, there's all kinds of them. These are cards from Mind Trap. And you can play it for a long time because there's a lot of different things. Today, in Kids Spirit, you're going to talk about a guy who had trouble seeing the big picture because a lot of awful things happened to him, and it was really hard to see the big picture. And sometimes we have that experience of just feeling too close to something. We need to take a breath. We need to step back. So that's what you're going to be talking about as you talk about Joseph, and we're going to be talking about that as we talk about Ruth and Naomi and Oprah. So,
Window or Aisle Into the Wilderness by Sarah Morse Campbell. Window or aisle? The man at the counter asked, and as I prepared to board the plane for Detroit. No matter how often I fly, I always pause to make the choice. To take a window seat means being able to get a God's eye view of Earth. But what if I want to go to the restroom? It's such a bother to have to ask people to move, and I don't like feeling trapped. My answer is always the same: window. To choose the window is to choose to see, whether I am identifying a river or marveling at the play of moonlight on the ocean, whether the view is a patchwork of planted fields, a city showing off its neon finery, or a comforter of clouds, I am filled with a deep sense of awe. Sometimes as the plane moves through a storm, breaking through the clouds and into the sun, my own spirit opens up to invite in the expanse of beauty. There is always something to see, always something I have never seen before. Knowing that to choose the window is an invitation to beauty, awe, and wonder, that it is even an opportunity to break through the cloudness of my own spirit, why do I always pause to make the decision? Each time we get a seat on a plane, we are invited to choose to be touched by the world or to remain complacent and take it for granted. We are invited to choose between beauty or fear, vision or convenience. Each day of our lives, in fact, we are given the choice, window or aisle. Something inside me will always pause before I choose. But I think I'll take the window. This is the wisdom of a contemporary Unitarian Universalist minister.
may we find wisdom for our living.
A reading from the book of Ruth in the Hebrew Bible. This is one of the only two books that bear the name of a woman in the Jewish Christian scriptures. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in a country of Moab. He and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other, Ruth. When they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem, although both Ruth and Orpah began the journey with her. In response of Naomi's urging, Orpah decided to return and stay with her family. So Ruth and Naomi went on together until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Call me no longer Naomi, which means pleasant, but call me Mara, which means bitter. Because life has dealt bitterly with me, I went away full, and I have come back empty." They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. This is a story from the community of ancient Israel.
Mark Nepo tells a very insightful story in his book called The Book of Awakening. It's the story of an aging Hindu master, a master who grew weary of the complaints of his apprentice. So one morning, the master said to the unhappy young man, "Please go and get some salt." When the student returned, the master asked the apprentice to put a handful of salt in a glass of water and to drink it. And when the master asked, "How does it taste?" "Bitter," spit the apprentice. The master chuckled, and then he asked the young man to take another handful of salt and put it in the lake. And the old man said, "Now, drink from the lake." As water dripped down the young man's chin, the master asked, "How does it taste?" "Fresh," remarked the apprentice. "Do you taste the salt?" asked the master. "No," said the young man. At this, the master sat beside this serious young man who reminded him so much of his younger self. And taking both of his hands, he said to him, "The pain of life is pure salt, no more, no less. But the amount of bitterness we taste depends on the container we put the pain in. So when you're in pain, the only thing you can do is enlarge your sense of things and stop being a glass and become a lake." In the world of the ancient story, Naomi was a long way from water when she struggled to find a new container for her pain. Her story begins much like the story of so many families. Shortages of food and rising unemployment means migration. It's the story of this nation of ours, isn't it? Hunger has built this country. In the course of my lifetime alone, hunger has brought countless Ukrainian, Hungarian, Irish, Vietnamese, Somali, Sudanese, and now Syrian immigrants to this land in search of the simple security of daily bread. Be that literal hunger, or to secure any basic safety, whether that's food or freedom or employment or shelter or security. Migration is one of those survival skills that we have learned from the non-human creatures of the earth. Naomi left her country and her customs, her family, her faith community, to follow her husband from Bethlehem east, across the Jordan River into Moab, which is present-day Jordan. They went in search of a better life. Famine had shriveled the opportunities in their homeland of Bethlehem, ironically, the town whose name literally means house of bread. So Naomi and Elimelech and their 2 sons became economic refugees to a new world. But a decade later, the hope of better times had become the reality of bitter times. And Naomi's losses are unthinkable. Within a decade, she finds herself alone in a foreign land. Not only is she left a widow, but she is scarred by perhaps the deepest pain any parent can know, the pain of surviving all of her children. And it's at this point in her story that we meet her. And she has decided to return home. We've all lived long enough to know it's never easy to go home again. She's not the same person she was when she left Bethlehem a decade earlier, and there's no success story to smooth her re-entry into the community that she left in search of greener pastures. To go back is to go back empty-handed and empty-hearted, with the simple hope that her community will open its hands and open its heart to receive her with compassion rather than criticism. So in the midst of her grief and pain, she chooses this impossible journey of returning home. Choosing to go back to the faith of her childhood, to go back to her extended family, to go back to a world that will be both familiar and will bear absolutely no resemblance to her memory of it. And Naomi is not entirely alone. Both of her widowed daughters-in-law began to make the journey with her. They would each now do what she had done a decade earlier and leave their people and their land and their families. Along the way, Orpah accepted Naomi's advice and turned back to stay with her own family. She made that very difficult choice to return and rebuild her life on the fault line of her losses. That's no easy thing. It takes great courage to stay with all the tangible reminders of what we have lost. To choose not to run from the place where we have lost it all. And to carve out a future on the crater of the past is a courageous choice. She didn't take the easy way out. Orpah chose to rebuild her life on its very roots. She stays to face the memories and the pain, carry the history, let go of what can never be again, and seek to find a larger container for her pain by returning to her mother's house. And the story leaves us hanging. It tells us nothing more about how it may have been that Orpah found a larger container for her pain. Her sister-in-law chooses differently. Ruth chooses to go on and not go back. She chooses to cast her lot with Naomi, a choice which actually promises her nothing except the opportunity to share poverty. But she's choosing to play the hand she was dealt, not to return to the table in terms of a better deal. She chooses to ignore the conventional wisdom that blood is thicker than water, and she commits herself to a family that has been created by tears, not by blood. Over the years that they'd known each other, Naomi and Ruth had shared many losses. They'd grieved together 3 deaths that had changed their lives forever. And it was the power of their shared pain and their mutual vulnerability that made them family. It wasn't the social arrangement of marriage. So they went to Bethlehem together, seeking a larger container for their pain. The story tells us that the pain of life had taken its toll on Naomi. When they got back to Bethlehem, people barely recognized her. When they asked if she were Naomi, she said, "Don't call me Naomi anymore." She couldn't bear to wear the name Pleasant. She asked to be named Mara. Her new name was descriptive of this devastating decade of her life. Her new name was Bitter. And there are so many things in life that leave a bitter taste. And the accumulation of life's losses can be very bitter indeed. We do tend to become a glass. It's a journey to becoming a lake. And it's hard to be enlarged by our pain. Even as a society, we speak of this time in which we live in terms of a shrinking economy. And in a period of downsizing, it's challenging to upsize our vision, to see the bigger picture. And yet there's probably never a more important time to expand our field of vision, to imagine new ways of working, new ways of providing services, new ways of organizing our lives together, new sources of energy, new ways of growing our food, new ways of sharing our resources, new ways of practicing our professions, new choices around our patterns of consumption. When I was driving home on Tuesday night, I was enveloped in fog. And there's something about being in the midst of that kind of pea soup with such limited visibility that shrinks the wide expanse of the prairie into the interior of a car. And it asks for a very singular focus. But your focus can't be on the fog, because if you focus on the fog, then you're utterly disoriented. Even on a road I know like the back of my hand, if I focus on the fog, I have trouble finding the exit. The focus has to be on the wee little bit of road that is lit before me. By the next morning, that fog had painted everything white with hoarfrost. When daylight lifted the fog, it also transformed the landscape. And I couldn't help but be overwhelmed by the big picture of a world where everything was altered. Everything was blanketed in beauty and in wonder. on that very same road the next morning, I had a window seat. The night before, I had an aisle seat. Naomi and Ruth didn't find a larger container for their pain overnight. They didn't see the big picture right away. Survival was precarious. They're two widows who arrive in Bethlehem with no viable means of putting bread on their table. As a foreign woman, Ruth likely met more than her share of the inevitable suspicion that's experienced by so many immigrants of all times and all places, perceived as a threat, a potential drain on precious resources, a strain on the healthcare system, an abuser of the social safety net, someone competing for a job that should go to a national. And Naomi is an older woman, a widow, someone without any viable means of supporting herself. And they rely on each other and on their deep bond of commitment and their collective wisdom and their willingness to do whatever it takes to simply survive, to make it through the fog. Naomi's ingenuity pins their hopes on a distant relative. So they devise a plan where Ruth would spend her days in this relative's field. His name was Boaz, going along behind the harvesters and just gleaning the leftovers. By her back-breaking work and the exercise of some compassion on Boaz's part, Ruth manages to eke out a living and to keep food on the table for herself and her mother-in-law. As time goes by, they begin to work towards finding a future with some measure of real security. It occurs to Naomi to make the law of her land work for her, to invoke the ancient obligation of the next of kin in her culture to provide social security by marrying the widow of his nearest relative. This is a culture where it's really important to like your in-laws, because they may be way more intimately related to you before time is through with all of you. Together, Naomi and Ruth devise a plan to prevail upon Boaz's sense of honor, to take Ruth to be his wife. By her resourcefulness and risk-taking, Ruth gains the respect of Boaz. And instead of taking advantage of her, he preserves her dignity and secures the right to marry her. And in the end, Ruth is redeemed from poverty, and Naomi is redeemed from emptiness and obscurity. In their journey through vulnerability, Ruth and Naomi find their way from the glass to the lake. Blessed be the journey that we each make from the glass to the lake. Journeys into seeing a bigger picture. Journeys in which our bitter times, over time, are diluted into the grace and gratitude of the best of times. Journeys in which we find home in both the familiar and the unfamiliar. Journeys in which we accompany one another in the pleasantness and in the bitterness, helping one another to find containers for our personal pain and also for our social pain and our global pain, for the pain of the world. Surely, If spiritual communities have any reason to exist, it's to build larger containers, not smaller ones. So we hold this silence now with one another to ponder what will help us, each of us, to become a lake. We have gathered in light and we go in light, taking with us the light of insight, the light of experience, the light of wisdom, ancient and new. And we go in that lifelong work of transforming that which tends to shrink life into the long journey of that which expands it. We go taking with us our joy and our pain, seeking together to become a lake in which all of life is held in gratitude, authentically, truthfully. And so we go with one another in the midst of all our living.